Afternoon, students. We are now on our literature class, our first lesson for this week. To start with, I'd like you to bring out these things: your student anthology book, your pen, and your literary companion. This week's selection, specifically our poem, is entitled Annabel Lee. Get your student anthology and open on pages 418 until 429. All right, let us have a review. Last week, week 15, we had this new selection entitled A Series of Unfortunate Events, The Bad Beginning. We tried to identify the different elements that we have in the story. We also tried to answer what? Great, the critical thinking questions. For your reading skill, we also pointed out point of view. What is it again? Okay, it is the character's perspective, which involves the thoughts or thinking, feelings, actions, and reactions. Now, my question is the character's point of view the same or consistent or only one all throughout the story? Yes or no? Great. The answer is no. Why? Because the character's point of view may change or deepen. It depends depending on the events that the character experiences. Got it? Great job. So to fully analyze point of view in a story, we have to compare the perspective or the point of view of multiple or different characters. Great job. Let us now state our objectives. First, say I can answer the critical thinking questions. Good. I can tell the elements in the poem entitled Annabel Lee. And for the last one, I can identify the medium used in the text or in the poem. Great. You may now check this week's selection on your eAlpha account. It has been assigned in your account. Start logging in. Thank you. Our poem for this week is entitled Annabel Lee. It is written by the great writer Edgar Allan Poe. It is found in your student anthology book on pages 418 until 429. Allow me to give you the background. Edgar Allan Poe, from 1809 until 1849, was an American writer and magazine editor best known for his poetry and short stories. Poe had a great influence on two new literary genres on the 19th century, detective fiction and science fiction. He was among the first writers in English to publish these types of stories. Many of his poems and stories have mysterious themes. Annabel Lee, his last major poem, is about the death of a beautiful young woman. Poe's inspiration for the poem was likely the death of his own young wife 2 years earlier. Now, as you read the poem, consider the impact of presenting Annabel Lee in a poem. How might a reader respond differently if Poe had described her in a story instead? Although Edgar Allan Poe is best known today for his eerie short stories, he first came to fame as a poet. Poe's first book, published when he was only 18, was Tamerlane and Other Poems. The poem Annabel Lee was written in 1849, 2 years after the death of Poe's wife, and her name is Virginia Clemm Poe. The poem had not yet been published when Poe died in October 1849. A copy of it was printed in Poe's obituary in the New York Daily Tribune. All right, as you go through the text on pages 418 until 429, you will encounter the comics, but having the same text about Annabel Lee. Okay? Edgar Allan Poe's Annabel Lee has inspired many artists to create a visual response to the poem. The artist, the one who made the Annabel Lee comics named Julian Peters, uses a style found in graphic novels and comic strips to present Annabel Lee. He has illustrated a number of well-known poems in this format, which he calls poetry comics. Peter lives in Montreal, Canada. As you read, consider the impact of illustrations. How do they influence your understanding of the poem? Take your time in reading. I see that you are now ready for our critical thinking questions. Move on your page 430 in Student Anthology. Prepare your pen also. For our first question, what does the speaker repeat to describe Annabel Lee? And why does he repeat it? Take your time in answering and write on the space provided for you. Great. It is. The speaker repeatedly calls her what? Great. Beautiful. And this repetition emphasizes his endless devotion to her. To him, she is both a beloved person, when we say beloved, someone you love, and an ideal of beauty. Got it? Great. Next one, we have to interpret. One of the figurative languages that we have discussed is metaphor. What is metaphor again? Great. A metaphor is a comparison that shows similarities between two different things. Or for short, this is a direct comparison of two things. Now, how might the wind mentioned in lines 15 and 25 be interpreted as a metaphor? Start answering now. Right. The wind is a metaphor for great death. It comes unexpectedly and it is strong enough to kill Annabel Lee and destroy the speaker's happiness. Good job. To interpret. First, what does night represent in this poem? And what do the stars represent? Start thinking for your answers. All right. The night represents Annabel Lee's death. And the stars remind the speaker of the eyes of his darling and bride. They represent his memory of Annabel. They are present despite her absence. Good job. Moving on with our number 4, connect. It is often said that a picture is worth 1,000 words. Which page in the illustrated version of Annabel Lee best shows how a picture tells 1,000 words? And explain your answer. What page is it? All right, it might be the first page. Why? Because this introduces everything readers need to know to understand the poem. We have seen there on the picture the sea, the kingdom, Annabel Lee, and the speaker of the poem. The expression on the speaker's face seems to suggest the sadness that comes later in the poem. It would take many words to explain these details given in the art or through the comics. Now, let us have number 5. Consider both versions of Annabel Lee, the poem and the comics. What can you infer about the poem's speaker? Describe the speaker's personality and feelings using evidence from the poem. Start writing your answer now. We could say that the speaker is capable of a great love, as shown in his descriptions of Annabel Lee. He also has a dreamy, romantic nature that holds on to the past. Every night he dreams of his love, and the stars remind him of her great eyes. He seems to have no desire to move on in life. Losing his love seems to doom him to permanent sadness. Let us evaluate for the last one. Do you think the graphic text accurately depicts the poem as Poe intended it? Why or why not? All right, the graphic text accurately or exactly follows the story, step by step, and dramatically portrays many scenes. It adds details that Poe may not have intended, however. For example, as a prank, the young couple steals a piece of fruit from a seller. This shows a less idealized version of the couple than the poem suggests. Now, we shall continue your reading lesson. As for your reading skill, we have to compare texts in different mediums. Get your literary companion and open on pages 266 until 267. Have you found the page? Good job. So I have gotten here an excerpt from the poem Annabel Lee and a page from your student anthology, particularly on 424, presenting the same excerpt from Annabel Lee. We will try to compare texts in different mediums. Like most poems, Annabel Lee was written to appear as words on the printed page, like this first one. This is how we commonly do a poem, isn't it? Yet poems can be presented in other ways too, just like what Julian Peters did based on the given example on the second one found in your student anthology. Julian Peters created a new version of this poem by Edgar Allan Poe using a style of illustration that may be familiar to you from the comic books or graphic novels. Got it? So let us read. For the example, I was a child and she was a child in this kingdom by the sea. But we loved with a love that was more than love, I and my Annabel Lee. With a love that the winged seraphs in heaven coveted her and me. Seraphs is synonymous with angels. After reading this excerpt from Annabel Lee poem, we have the illustrated version made by Julian Peters. Okay, teacher, what makes this version different? The illustrator, or Julian Peters, imagined details that are not present in the poem itself. This second example, this illustration found on your student anthology on page 424, makes this different from the original one. Why, teacher? First, we have more characters. We could see on the up a fruit seller and his customer. They appear here, but not in the original poem. Second, we have actions. The artist shows specific ways in which the characters behave or act like children, playfully stealing a piece of fruit and gazing at the night sky. Down there. Okay. We also have setting. The place, ship masts, and the lighthouse show what the kingdom by the sea is like. The clothing and the cobblestone streets reveal that the poem is set in the past. Okay. We also have visual symbol. The heart with an arrow through it is a symbol of true love. You can see from here up. And we also have emphasis. The words Annabel Lee appear in big capital letters, making them stand out. Okay, I and my Annabel Lee. This format increases the number of pages, which changes how the poem is read. It's totally different. A reader must pause or stop over each line looking at how it is illustrated. This graphic or illustration treatment gives readers a new experience of a familiar work. Yet, by reading the poem on its own without the illustrations, each reader, like you, uniquely imagines the characters, the kingdom, and the story. An experience that is also enjoyable and meaningful. Each medium or each way, writing alone or writing plus visual art like this one, writing plus comics, has its own strengths. Now let us apply what you've learned. Compare texts in different mediums. Read the excerpt from Annabel Lee, then look at the page 7 in your online in your E-Alpha student anthology. Complete the chart comparing elements that appear in the two versions. We have the poem, which is written in words, and the illustrated version made by Julian Peters. So we have the excerpt example. The angels, not half so happy in heaven, went envying her and me. Yes, there was the reason, as all men know in this kingdom by the sea, that the wind came out of the cloud by night, chilling and killing my Annabel Lee. Now, in the poem, we have the character's actions, which is none, because definitely it's written in words. How about for the illustrated version? The character's actions are, all right, we have Annabel Lee and the speaker dancing. And we also have the two men talking. Good job. How about for weather events? For poem, we have wind and cloud, as what mentioned. Next, how about for the illustration or illustrated version? The weather events, we have wind, cloud, rain, and lightning. We can see it from the drawing. And for word emphasis, we have good job! Exclamation point. As what we could see above, okay, on the words after the word yes. For the illustrated version, of course, we have seen in the illustration the exclamation point. We have the Annabel Lee in capital letters. We have some lines start with larger capital letters. Good job, students. Above mentions the kingdom by the sea, but does not give specific details about it. What details of setting are supplied in the illustrated version made by Julian Peters? All right, we see the clouds where the angels are watching, a room where two men are talking, and a beach in the middle of a thunderstorm. Great. For number 3, in your opinion, which is more effective, the illustrated version or the poem on its own? Explain your answer. Okay, we could say that the illustrated version is more effective because the reader can see the speaker and the subject. The pictures are better at showing the setting. For example, the dark pages reinforce the poem's dark mood. Good job, students. For this week literature lesson, remember the different elements present in the poem Annabel Lee, made by Edgar Allan Poe, with the printed version or the illustrated version made by Julian Peters. And also, don't forget the mediums used in the text. This has been Teacher Frances saying to you, goodbye everyone. Thank you for listening. Take care.